Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Vicarage here at Penn on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Lovely to see you. Hope you are well and cheerful. And great to see you. And I'm glad that you could join us for our Bible talk for this morning. If I may just give a quick notice, please, about church. Well, I'm delighted to say we're going to allow singing in church again as from this week. Won't that be wonderful? Join in the hymns and that sort of thing. That's going to be terrific. But I'm also aware, the PCC are very aware, that for many people, all this relaxation of restrictions and so on is quite scary. And we don't want people at church to be frightened. We want our church to be a safe place. We want people to feel comfortable and feel safe. So we're going to ask people to continue to wearing masks. Please, can you bring your masks to church this weekend? We need to carry on wearing them, not so much for ourselves, but to protect our neighbours and make sure everyone feels comfortable and safe in church. So this weekend, we're going to carry on social distancing in church with the pews. We're going to carry on wearing masks to keep everybody safe. But the good news is we're going to be allowed singing. Won't it be great to be able to join in with the praises of God again? Anyway, that was a brief notice. More on that tomorrow and Friday, just to let you know what's going on. Friends, we are working and we are getting towards now the back end of the second letter of Paul to the Corinthians. So without further ado, I shall take it from here. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, starting to read at verse 1. Paul writes, "It's necessary to boast. Nothing is to be gained by it. But I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a person in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up in the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. God knows. And I know that such a person, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard things that are not to be told, that no mortal is permitted to speak. On behalf of such a one, I will boast, but on my own behalf, I will not boast, except of my weaknesses. But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, but it would not leave me, that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. I've been a fool. You forced me into it. Indeed, you should have been the ones commending me, for I am not at all inferior to those super apostles, even though I am nothing. The signs of a true apostle were performed among you with utmost patience, signs and wonders and mighty works. How have you been worse off than other churches, except that I myself did not burden you? Forgive me this wrong. Here I am, ready to come to you this third time, when I will not be a burden, because I do not want what is yours, but you, for your children, ought not to lay up for their parents, but parents for their children. I will most gladly spend and be spent for you. If I love you more, am I to be loved less? Let it be assumed that I did not burden you. Nevertheless, you say, since I was crafty, I took you in by deceit. Did I take advantage of you through any of these whom I sent to you? I urged Titus to go and sent the brother with him. Titus did not take advantage of you, did he? Did we not conduct ourselves with the same spirit? Did we not take the same steps? Have you all been thinking all along that we've been defending ourselves before you? We are speaking in Christ before God. Everything we do, beloved, is for the sake of building you up. For I fear that when I come, I may find you not as I wish, that you may find me not as you wish. I fear that there may perhaps be quarrelling, jealousy, anger, selfishness, slander, gossip, deceit, conceit, and disorder. I fear that when I may come again, my God may humble me before you, and that I may have to mourn over many who previously sinned and have not repented of the impurity, sexual immorality, and licentiousness that they've practiced. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Difficult reading again. Paul's on form at the moment, isn't he? I'll try and make sense of it if I possibly can. I mentioned yesterday that Paul has had to boast about his credentials because other peoples have come along and they've been boasting about their qualifications and all this type of stuff. And Paul, because of that, has felt he's had to boast about his credentials and things that he's been doing. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's foolishness. But because it's that he thinks it's kind of the language the Corinthians understand, he's felt he's needed to do it. And I suppose the advantage from our point of view is that we do hear some incredible things that have gone on. Clearly, on Paul's, we now know our 2 previous visits, some spectacular things have happened. God has clearly been there in power. There have been signs and wonders. He talks about having visions, and we do know from the book of Acts that Paul regularly had visions. And we hear this interesting story about this person who's caught up in the 3rd heaven. And you get the impression of all the visions, this is kind of the big one. And many commentators speculate that it was actually Paul himself who had that vision. But he talks about knowing somebody who had it. So it's not all about look at me, aren't I wonderful? To take some of the of himself, to try and put the glory onto God. And many commentators have suggested that Paul's actually talking about himself about this. So you do hear about some spectacular things. And when Paul had been in Corinth, clearly God had been very, very much in power. Signs and miracles had happened, and great things had gone on. And the temptation with this, for somebody who has a very powerful ministry like this, is that it can go to their heads. And history is full of stories about people who've been very, very spiritually powerful, for whom things have gone to their heads. They've been conceited and have gone off the rails. And so Paul talks about himself, and he talks about being given what he calls a thorn in the flesh, what he calls this minister of Satan. It's quite interesting that he gets kind of sent this minister of Satan. It's interesting, and you almost get the impression that the minister of Satan has been sent by God. It's quite an interesting passage here, really. And whatever it is, we don't know, but we do know that it was sent there to keep Paul humble, to stop him becoming conceited, because great things have been going on. And rather than Paul going to his head, becoming conceited and start thinking it's all about me, this thorn in the flesh came along and kept Paul humble. And Paul talks about this being given, this thorn in the flesh, and he asks God to take it away, but God hasn't, because he's there to keep him humble. Now, what is interesting here is we don't know what this thorn in the flesh is. And as you can imagine, there have been many PhDs written about this. Many speculation by commentators over the years. All sorts of things have been suggested. Could be frequent headaches, could be depression, could be the opposition you receive from the persecution, it could be sexual temptation, all manner of things it could be. We don't know what it is, but we do know that it had the effect of keeping Paul humble, stopping him getting conceited. And I suppose the more I think about it, I'm actually quite glad we don't know what this thorn in the flesh is. Because if we knew what it was, we'd isolate it down to one thing. I suppose in some ways, I think it's quite good that we don't know, because in a sense, we all have our own thorns in the flesh. We all have our temptations, what our spiritual rector used to call our besetting sins. We all have those weaknesses in our lives. And I suppose in a sense that if God can bring good out of the minister of Satan, in a sense here, you can say that God brings good out of our difficulties, that our difficulties can stop us getting conceited. That when great things are happening, when we're going on in our faith, that we doesn't go to our head, that we don't start thinking it's all about us. And so in the same way that Paul was sent his thorn in the flesh, which we don't know what it was, but we do know that it had the effect of keeping him humble. So likewise in our lives, maybe some of the stresses and strains and besetting temptations and frustrations that we have in our life, maybe our thorns in the flesh are there to keep us humble too, to keep us depending on God, remembering that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. Because when we think we are strong, that's when we start depending on ourselves. We start thinking it's all about us. But when we know we're weak, when we know when we're not conceited, when we're humble, that's when we start pushing into God. So we've heard so far about some incredible things that have been going on in Paul's life and in the ministry, when he's ministry amongst the Corinthians. But we hear here that to stop him being conceited, we have this thorn in the flesh, which is this mysterious thorn in the flesh, which actually keeps Paul humble. And actually, like I said, even through this minister, what he calls this minister of Satan, that actually Paul's enhancing his faith, keeping him on track. So actually, our problems and frustrations can keep us on track too. But finally, Paul talks on about why he does it all. And he talks about basically, I've done all this for your sake. And all this complicated stuff at the end about not being a burden to you and so on. What Paul is saying is, I'm not charging you for my ministry. I don't wish to be any kind of burden on you. But he wants to say that the whole purpose of his ministry, the purpose of everything he's doing is for their sake. He wants to come and see them soon. And he wants his meeting with them to be a good time. He's had his difficulties with them. They've had their confrontations and their problems and so on, and they've had some difficult meetings in the past. But Paul is hoping and praying that his next meeting is a good one, that those who were sinning in the past have repented and turned towards God, that there won't be the slander, the accusations, that they'll have turned it all around. And Paul is hoping and praying that his next meeting with them is a happy one and a good one. And he's saying here, before it comes, I want you to know that everything I do it for your sake. So, in this reading this morning, we hear about some incredible things that happened when Paul was ministering in the Corinthians. And some great visions and so on, great things that were going on. But like all of us, to keep Paul humble, he had this thorn in the flesh which kept him humble, which kept him in check, to stop it going to his head, to keep him pushing into God, keep him humble, keep him pushing into God. But finally, we remember that the whole purpose of ministry, and actually the purpose of all ministry today, should be about leading people to Christ and doing everything we can to make sure that other people in the faith, and we're all built up in God. Hope that makes sense. Another tricky reading today. I hope you feel that